Hello my dear YouTuber friends, and I do hope you're all keeping well. Welcome to this new video, which are my Velocity 1 flight yacht system settings for X-Plane 11. I know a number of you have requested this, and you also play X-Plane 11 alongside Microsoft Flight Simulator. So hopefully this video will be of interest to a number of you. So let's not beat around the garden bush. Let's get on with this video. Okay, so I'm set up at runway 27 London City Airport. I do have a freeware scenery. It's London VFR. I'm going to link this down in the description for you. It's lovely freeware scenery for London. Really fills out London well. If you got X-Plane 11 for some time, you may have it already, but I'll link it for you anyway. I'm in the default Cessna Skyhawk. It's the default Skyhawk that comes with X-Plane 11. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go to my settings. You can do this from the main menu. Just go to settings, or you can go up here to the right and click on settings. So it's that icon there. Okay, so one thing to be aware about with the Velocity 1, like Microsoft Flight Simulator, in devices you've got two different devices. One is for, I was actually on the right one there, one's for your yoke part of your system. So if you move your yoke about, you should see some lines moving like that. If you choose the other device, that's going to be for your throttle quadrant. So move your throttle levers and goodness knows what, and you'll see the blue lines moving there. What it will say to you, and I've done this already, but I'll do it again. I'll go back to the yoke part. It will say here, typically, calibrate your system. It's not calibrated. Very important to calibrate it. Even though you may have it calibrated in Windows or Microsoft Flight Simulator, recalibrate it again in X-Plane. Otherwise, you're going to get some odd behaviors. I'll go through this with you. Go to calibrate up here. Roll, move your roll fully left and fully right, and it will accept automatically. Pitch fully out or backwards and fully forward. It will accept automatically. And your rudders, hold your left trigger down fully and your right trigger down fully. It will accept automatically. All go blue. Go to next. And it will just say leave your controls centered. Go to next. Leave them centered. Let that count down. And hey presto, it's all calibrated. As easy as that. Let's just go over my basic setup first. So my roll left and right. I'm not sure now if this was set up by default. If it's not, move your yoke left and right. You can see the line moving here. It should be this top one here. If it's not selected, go down to this drop down box and at the top here just select roll. Same for the pitch. Move it in and out your yoke. If it's not set up, if it's not selected here, same pitch, click that drop down menu and then just select pitch. And for your, that's essentially your rudder. So move your triggers left and right, or press your triggers left and right rather. If it's not set up as your, go down to the drop down box and select your. Simple as that. Now, response curves. I don't believe these have changed. I've not altered these, I don't believe. If you want to alter them, make them less sensitive or make them behave differently. So, you know, if you want a bit of grunt in your yoke system, make it a little bit harder, a little bit more firm. You can grab hold of this dot here, left click and hold it, and then you can move it around and that will alter the way it behaves in the sim. I'm going to press cancel there because I believe these are set up by default. I've just left them and they feel fine for me in the Cessna Skyhawk at least. So I'll leave that there. You can see that's on .05 and that's between .03 and .04. But I believe that is default. So there you go. That's my roll. Pitch is the same. Exactly the same reading. Leave that there for you. If it's set up by default, you don't need to do anything there. With the yaw, I did alter this slightly. It was a bit too sensitive, the trigger buttons, the yaw, the rudder, essentially. So I've altered it. I've got this over to .60 here on the bottom line. And I believe it's about the same as it was by default here between .30 and .40. Leave that there for you in case you want to copy that. Your triggers may be a bit sensitive too. So there you go. And controller sensitivity, I'm just going to click on that. I don't believe I've changed anything with the pitch and roll here. I've just kept them as default. With the yaw, I changed it to 36%. Like I said, it was a bit too sensitive for me, the rudder. So I've just changed it, and this works well. I'll show you that later. So I've just changed that to 36%. So there you go. I'll come to these settings in a moment. Let's just change this to the top device. This is now my throttle quadrant. Now, with this, I've just moved my GA handles. I'll show you a picture to the left there of the GA throttle controls on the Velocity 1. I just moved my throttle in and out to see which one it was. It's axis 5. And I went down to the drop-down box here, drop-down menu, and chose throttle here, obviously. So that's my throttle. With my prop, I did the same thing, prop handle there. I just went down to the drop-down box, moved it in and out to see which one it was pertaining to, axis 4. Went down to the drop-down box and chose prop, and the same for mixture. I've not set up my top throttle levers. You can see here, top throttle levers, I'm moving them up and down. I've not set them up. If you want a 4-engine aircraft, want to set them up to 4 throttles, you can do. So you can go here, for example, I could choose throttle 1 here, and then for the other, throttle 2, throttle 3. Not set them up, I've just set up my GA levers, but you can set them up. That's not going to be difficult to do. The only other thing I did, my trim rudder, my trim wheel, I moved that up and down. I believe I had to set this up, so I just moved it up and down to see which axis it was pertaining to. It's axis 6 there. And again, I went down to the drop-down menu, and I chose elevator trim. It'll basically trim the aircraft out. And I believe I did alter the response curve here slightly from default. It was a bit too sensitive, so I've altered it. And that's where I've got mine, and the trim wheel behaves well. So it's between, just before .50, between these two readings here. I'll leave that there for you in case you want to copy it. And that just makes the trim wheel a bit less sensitive. Just works well with the Cessna Skyhawk at least. So I'll leave that there in case you want to copy it. The others, the prop throttle, I just left actually I believe I left them at default. Yep, they're just by default, I believe. I didn't alter these, so they must be default. Just left the throttle, prop, and mixture I just left as default. So there you go, that's my basic flight controls. Let's now get on to these settings, my view settings. Okay, so let's talk over my view system that I've got set up. Now, by default, the views hat switch up, down, left, right, and goodness knows what, as you can see here. So the hat switch 1, I've got it on currently. These are set up by default on your left PLV1, basically your left hat switch. And what these do, if you move it around, I've now got it set up on my right. And it's just my preference. If you move your aircraft around, move that hat switch around, it will just pan your view around. I've got a button set up for external view. By default, it will work in external view as well. Let's get back into the cockpit. And all I did, I switched it from hat switch, my left PLV1 to PLV2, my right PLV. Because that's just my preference for panning my view around. And all I did here, I put all these to do nothing, so went down to this drop-down box, put them all to do nothing. I've changed a few of them now, but originally I just went to do nothing here to change them all. And then with the hat switch one, I think these were set as do nothing. On the hat switch up on my right PLV, went down to the drop-down box and just chose hat switch up, of course. Hat switch up and right, hat switch right. I just chose them all from the drop-down menus, whatever these directions are pertaining to. And that's how I set them up. That's pretty straightforward. You can keep it on your left PLV1 if that's too much messing around. I just prefer it on my right PLV. Didn't take me too long. It's this left PLV that is interesting. I've set up some custom views. So if I move my left PLV left, I've got a quick view left. If I move it right, I've got a quick view right. If I move it down, I've got a sort of autopilot view here that I've set up. And I've got a button to reset my cockpit view, basically. If I move it left and move it left again, it'll go back to your default view anyway. And I also saved this cockpit view as a quick view as well. And all I did, when I jumped into the aircraft, I held down, I'll show you this on screen, a diagram. I held down my left control and numpad 2 for this one, in fact, this view. Left control and numpad 2. And it's saved as a quick view. And it's a bit complicated, this, but the way to find this, go into keyboard. These will all normally be closed. Close all your menus. Go to views. Go to quick look. Open that menu. And basically, I just found numpad 2 here. So that's the one I've set up as my default view. And it's pertaining to go to save 3D cockpit location 3. Remember this part here. Write it down if necessary. Go to save 3D cockpit location 3. Went back to my velocity 1. And basically, I've got a button. I'll show you on screen which button I've got set up on my velocity 1 to reset my cockpit view. It's here. And I just went to edit here and found that go to save location cockpit 3. It's down near the bottom here. And that basically, if I move my view around, it will just reset my view. Again, what I did, I just moved my mouse left, for example. That will do. And I press Control and 3, I believe, for this one. I'm going to set one of these up with you. So I'm going to show you the actual process. Went to keyboard. Went to my quick look menu again. It's already open. And I just saw what numpad 3, I made a note of that location. Go to save cockpit location 4. Went back to my velocity 1. Don't worry, I'm going to set one of these up with you. Let's just scroll back to the top so I can get to my left PLV settings. So when I move my PLV left, PLV 1 left, it will... I went to edit here. Well, I went down to this drop-down menu first. Go to custom. I'm going to set one of these up, like I said. So I'm going to talk you through this. Went down to custom. Then it went down to in this menu. And I chose whatever that was pertaining to, what I showed you before, I believe. And the same for my instrument views. I used my cursor keys, by the way, to get down to that instrument views. So I'll show you that. I'm moving my cursor keys on my keyboard. Use my mouse to zoom in a little bit to get a view of that autopilot panel. And I saved that as a custom location too. Sounds a bit complicated, all that. So I'm going to show you how you set this up. I'm going to set one up with you. Now, for example, I've not got my hat switch, PLV hat switch up set up yet. I want a view over my nose of my aircraft. So I'm going to use my cursor keys on my keyboard. Just going to move my cursor keys up, and I'm going to use my mouse to zoom in a little bit. That will give me a view over the nose of my aircraft. I'm going to set this up as custom location 5. So hold my left control and numpad 5. Reset my cockpit view. If I press 5 on my numpad on my keyboard, it will now put me in that view. If I press it again, it will take me back to the view I had previously, which is my default cockpit view. So there you go, that's a view over the nose of my aircraft. Okay, that's set up. If I press my PLV up now, nothing's going to happen because I've not assigned it to that. Bear with me on this one, it's not easy. So basically, let's just get out of that. So on my PLV, left PLV 1, I've got do nothing at the moment set up. I'm going to go to my keyboard for first. Take a look at my quick look menu. And numpad 5, it's go to save cockpit, 3D cockpit location 6. Make a note of this. This is what I need to set up. It's complicated in X-Plane. There's no way around it. But this does work. Go to save 3D cockpit location 6. I'll go back to my velocity 1. Go back to joystick. On my left PLV up, I'm going to go click on that menu there. This is how I set all those views up. Go to custom. And then go to edit here. I'm going to have to scroll up a bit actually, because I'm down near the bottom. You can see the scroll bars down near the bottom. So I remember it's near the bottom. Go to 3D location 6, wasn't it? I believe. Not easy. It's a lot of messing around, setting up controls and X-Plane. But this is how I did it. And apply. And done. So if I move my hat switch up now, left PLV 1 up, it will go to that location. Move it down, it will go to that location I set up before. And that's how I set all these quick views up. And I've got that button to reset my cockpit view. And that's brilliant. So now I'm all set up. And with my right PLV, I can just pan around, like I said before. Let me just show you the button assignment I've got set up for external view, in fact. So go to my settings, make sure you're on your yoke part. So your device up here, make sure it's showing the yoke. I'm going to click my right bumper button, basically. And all I did there is went into edit. So I clicked it. It was on do nothing originally. Went into edit. And obviously just chose the views where it's got views here. Again, it's in this location here. It's the best I can do to show you that. It's not easy with X-Plane. But I just chose the chase view. So if I press that, it will go to my chase view. I can use my right PLV, PLV2, to move my view around there, to pan it around. By default, that's on PLV1. Press the button, press my button to show my default cockpit view there, and it will put me back into the cockpit. So all set up with my views. Let's go on to other settings. Okay, so let's continue. Whilst I'm on the yoke part, so I've got my yoke part selected in the devices here, I'll show you some of the other buttons I've got set up. Now, with my left hat 1, basically, it's called hat 1. If I move it down, it will put my flaps down a notch. That's quite self-explanatory. Move that hat switch 1 up, it will put my flaps up a notch. So I can actually show you that. Down, obviously, moves my flaps down. Very audible in X-Plane, which is very nice. And then it will move my flaps up if I move it up. Nothing much to say about that one. Let me just reset my cockpit view. Go back to my settings. It's the right hat switch, which is quite interesting. So hat 2 on your Velocity 1 controller. This is an interesting one. Now, let's go vertical speed up and down first. If I move it down, it will change my vertical speed down, and that's the setting to change vertical speed down and up. In fact, if I move it up, it will change my vertical speed up, or increase my vertical speed, and down will decrease my vertical speed. So it's basically autopilot. This is the setting you want to look at. That's where I am on the sort of menus or the settings there. It's about center. Choose VV1 up and VV1 down. Autopilot VV1 down. That's your vertical speed. I can cancel that. And basically, now I'm going to talk you through this more later. I'll show you this in more detail. Let's get down to my autopilot view. I'm just going to turn a few autopilot buttons on here. So I'll put heading mode on, for example, and altitude, even though I'm not up in the air. And I've got a button set up for vertical speed as well. I'll show you this later. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to move my hat switch 2 down and up, and you can see it changes the vertical speed value. So 300 feet per minute, for example, down to descend. But move my hat switch 2 up, I will increase my altitude. I'm going to show you a test flight and show you these settings later. This is pertaining to this default Cessna Skyhawk. With the Cessnas with the G1000, it might be slightly different, although it should be pretty much the same. It'll just show a different display, of course. But that's what I've got my hat switch 2 set up and down for vertical speed. Let's disconnect autopilot there. We don't need it off. Go back to my default view. Again, setting these settings up, it took me a while to find these in X-Plane. You really have to research to find out what controls or what commands do what. With my hat switch 2 left and right, basically, it will move my autopilot heading down and autopilot heading up. So again, to find these, go into the custom view there, click on if it. Essentially, this was set as do nothing, like this is here, B13. I've got that set up. Or this one here, it's my left bumper button. I've got that set up as do nothing. I don't need that set up yet. This is originally set up as do nothing. Just go to edit. So autopilot heading down, for example. Go to heading. Go to edit. And then just find autopilot in the autopilot menu here down. And okay, let's show you what this does. If I'm in heading mode, you see the heading bug here. It will move my heading bug left and right so I can control my aircraft direction of where it's turning in heading mode. And I'll show you the buttons I've got set up for heading mode later. But that will move my heading bug around. Okay, so not to complicate things, let me now show you my throttle quadrant settings that I've got set up for autopilot. So I'll show you on screen what button this is, but it's my top left button on my throttle quadrant. I've got something set up called servos toggle. Now in X-Plane, what that does is actually disconnect your autopilot systems. So again, I'm going to show you this. I'm going to show you this in flight later. Let's go down to this view to show you. If I've got set up nav mode, for example, or heading mode, and I want to disconnect that, I want to take control of my aircraft, I'll click that toggle servos, and it will disconnect the autopilot. That's one way to do it. There's different ways of doing it, but that's the way I've done it. So that's that button again. Servos toggle, rather, to disconnect the autopilot. On the second button along there, top of the panel of buttons, second one along, it's basically B5 on my velocity 1. I've got autopilot, VOR, lock arm. That's essentially your nav button. So again, going to edit, it's on do nothing originally, go into edit and find in autopilot, VOR, lock arm. And what that does, like I showed you before, that will go into nav mode. If you've got a route set up, it will follow your flight plan, basically, if you're near the magenta line, of course. I don't have one set up. I'm not going to do it in this, because I would have to go into something like SimBrief to set up a route. Not going to show you that in this video, but essentially, if you have got routes, you're used to X-Plane, you're using SimBrief or something to set up routes, that's the command to set up nav. And I can toggle servos there to turn off my autopilot, as I don't need it on. So again, just to reiterate that, oops, cancel that. That button, second one along, B5 on my velocity 1 throttle quadrant, is autopilot VOR lock arm. That's to arm nav, essentially. Next one along, I've got set up as autopilot heading select. That's pretty self-explanatory. It will go into heading mode if I press that button. So just to show you that, press that button, it will go into heading mode, whatever my heading bug is set at. And remember, I set up my hat switch, that's where it comes into use. If I'm in heading mode, it will follow the course. You can see my yokes moving there. I'm not moving them. It's because I'm moving that heading bug. It's trying to follow it. Let's not confuse the poor aircraft. Let's turn the autopilot off. So again, that's B7 on my velocity 1 throttle quadrant. Autopilot heading select to go into heading mode. Altitude select for the next button, B9, I believe it is. Autopilot altitude select or hold. It will go into your, whatever altitude you're at, it will hold that altitude. I'll show you this later. The next one along, B11, this is an interesting one. Autopilot vertical speed at current VSI. Not sure if that's completely correct, but it will go into vertical speed mode and let me alter vertical speed, basically. So let's just show you that, and I'll show you this up in the air in a moment. So if I press some autopilot buttons on, Press that button for vertical speed. It will go into vertical speed mode, and with my hat 2, like I showed you before, I can alter my vertical speed. I'm going to show you the effects of this later when we're up in the air. This is one way to set it up. Like I said, it's quite a complex setup system to set up controls, especially Autopilot X-Plane. There are external programs. I'm not going to go into them in this video. I'm just showing you my default settings. And if you get X-Plane, you can try this yourself. So that button will go into vertical speed mode. The only other button I've got set up is to toggle brakes regularly. That will toggle my parking brakes, essentially. That's button B4 on my throttle quadrant on my velocity 1. Okay, so I pretty much showed you, I believe, all the buttons I've got set up so far. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to go for a quick test flight and show you all these buttons and settings in action. Okay, so let me show you all these buttons in action now, all the settings. So let's just throttle up using my GA levers, release the parking brake. There's a lot of torque in X-Plane. It will try and move you to the left more than Flight Simulator if you've not tried X-Plane. Apparently very realistic. It does feel realistic with the rudder settings I've got set up. It's easy to compensate for that. Let's get up in the air. There we go, nice and simple. Just alter my trim there with my trim wheel, so I'm not climbing too sharply. This London, by the way, London VFR, this freeware file, it's a different... okay, look, compared to Flight Simulator, you've got to compare the ages of these platforms. For the age of X-Plane, this, look, I mean, look at it. Looks brilliant. I do recommend trying X-Plane. It's a different flight system to Flight Simulator, different controls. And it's certainly a great experience. Okay, what I'm going to do now is set up... let's go down to this autopilot view. Set up my... is my heading bug... you synced it is? Set up my heading... put it on heading mode. And altitude hold mode. Let's go back to my default view. Oops, default view. You will see it will hold the current altitude and hold my current heading. I can use my hat switch too to move my views around there. Oh, sorry, to move my heading around. So I'm not going to climb into buildings. I want to climb. Let me just throttle back. I'm over-revving the engine there. Really got to be careful in X-Plane about over-revving engines and goodness knows what. I want to increase my altitude, so I'm going to press the vertical speed button I showed you before and move my hat 2 up to increase my altitude. What this will do essentially is keep climbing until you cancel that, until you put vertical speed back to 0 again. Just doesn't that look lovely? Not as nice, obviously, as Flight Simulator. It's not quite the same level. Still looks pretty good and gritty. Does have a charm of its own, X-Plane. I do enjoy flying it. Let's just increase that vertical speed. I don't know. We'll get to about 750 feet, which we're getting to now. Just move my heading bug to the right a little bit to avoid crashing into the gherkin. There we go, that would do. Let me come down to this view. Move my hat 2 down to cancel that vertical speed now. There you go, so I'm at 0 vertical speed. So effectively, as you can see, it's leveled up. It's going to keep that current altitude I've got set up now. This is one way to do it. There are different ways. This is just the way I've got set up. This is made just simply by a sort of fan of X-Plane. You go into default London, it looks terrible. With this free add-on pack, linked down in the description, look at it. Beautiful for X-Plane, for the age of it. Looks fantastic. Let's get external. The rest of the buildings and surroundings, you've got to keep in mind it's an older platform. I'm very much looking forward to X-Plane 12. I think that will be a real game changer, a real contender to Microsoft Flight Simulator. I'm definitely getting that, no doubt. Okay, I want to get back towards London City Airport now. I'll keep it in autopilot and move my heading bug round to the east, which should bring me back round to a heading... oh, it's going to go the other direction. That's okay. Should have done that a bit slower, maybe. I wanted to go the... Never mind. We'll get right back around to London City Airport. Oh, in fact, I'm not keen on that. Let's just bring my heading bug here so it goes in the other direction. That's fine. Just moving my heading bug around. So with those controls in the default aircraft, as you can see, they work quite well. And if I did have a course set up, I'll be pressing my nav button. I'm not showing you that in this video. That's quite self-explanatory. I don't really need to talk through that. But it will follow your course if you had one set up. So there we go. We'll just spin this around. I do recommend trying X-Plane. If you're into Flight Simulator, maybe you just got back into Flight Simulation with Flight Simulator, you can pick up X-Plane cheaply via Steam, which is what I did. I got it for half price. I think I got it near a Christmas sale, and I picked up a sort of half price scenery package. Not this one. That's Central England. And it's just well worth doing. Well worth doing. It gives you a kind of sneak peek into what perhaps X-Plane 12 is going to be about too. I'm not going to crash into this building, am I? No, I should avoid that. It's fine. And let's just keep moving that heading bug around to the east. Up, east. And there we go, heading back towards the centre of London. And London City Airport is just ahead. Still in full autopilot control. No worries. Let it get a bit nearer. And yeah, I do recommend it because the aircraft tend to behave a little bit more realistically. For example, this aircraft, as I'll show you later, a little bit different to the way you control it in Flight Simulator. It just feels a bit more rustic, a bit more realistic, to be fair. Flight Simulator does a lot of things right, like the skies, the scenery, and goodness knows what. And the flight model's okay, it's a little bit different. It's getting there in the flight model. But X-Plane is really where you find the most realistic, generally, flight models. So in that sense, it's well worth trying. Get a couple of scenery packages, and it doesn't look half bad. You see, I'm moving my views with my quick views I showed you before around there. Doesn't look half bad at all. So we'll get towards that financial sector. Sorry about the crashing going on in the background. That's my housemates doing bits and bobs. We'll just have to put up with that if you can hear it. Maybe you can't, hopefully. There you go, there's the Gherkin to our left there. Move my heading bug to the left slightly. And we can probably just see London City Airport coming into view somewhat in the distance. It'll be over here, wouldn't it? Yep. That's fine. Just get past the financial district here, or near it, and then I'll take it off autopilot. Use my disconnect servos toggle, or toggle servos, to disconnect the autopilot. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to bring my speed back to try and get to flaps 1 speed, which will be around this arc here. And you really find with X-Plane, especially in this default Skyhawk, you really have to bring that throttle back to get it into flaps 1 speed. Tell you what, I'm going to disconnect the autopilot there, take control myself to get a feel for the aircraft. I'm going to have to... Oh, my trim wheel was out of sync slightly there. I was going to say I'm going to have to trim up slightly, and I have decreased my power as well, my throttle. Let's decrease it a bit more now. Really want to get to that flaps 1 speed as London City is coming up ahead there. There we go, we're at flaps 1 speed. Be careful with X-Plane if you've not tried it before. You do get a massive flare when going to flaps. So I'll just compensate for that. Bring in my throttle a little bit more now. Now I've got flaps 1, otherwise I'll be slowing down too much. And trim up. Lovely depiction of the financial district and the O2 Arena there. We're just going to miss that building, aren't I? Hopefully. Let's increase that throttle. I'm really slowing down more than I wanted to with flaps there as well. There you go. There's the O2 Arena. Get to that view so I can see the airport ahead there. Let's really get some more throttle going in there. It's better. Not doing the best job there, but never mind. I don't want to trim up that far. There we go. Let's just get this aircraft all configured. Oh, not doing the best job here. Never mind. Very different model to Flight Simulator. Very different model. There you go, the airport's just ahead. Let's line up with that. And there we go. Actually, Pappy Lights is spot on there. Too white. Well, now I'm a bit high, of course. So I'll bring back my throttle. Bring back my throttle. I'll go to flaps 2. Very audible flaps in X-Plane, which is nice. Oh, and dive bombed. Not the best. Not the best. I need a little bit more practice. I've been practicing more with the X-Plane model. Well, that's okay. We're over the runway. And I'll just flare over the runway here. Bring down that speed. I'm a little bit fast. Bring it down. There we go. Can I stall it on the runway? Oh, not quite. Not quite, but that will do. And there we go. We're down safely. Bring up my flaps. So there you go. Those are my settings that I've got set up on my Velocity one for X-Plane 11. Give it a try. I do recommend, like I say, you do try X-Plane. It's a different flight experience. Feels a little bit more gritty. And with X-Plane 12 on the horizon, might be a good time to try it. Do let me know your thoughts down below. Give the video a like if it's been helpful. Subscribe for more. And I'll see you very soon.